Because while the men have screwed up a lot of stuff, so have the adults. And the fact of the matter is, these kids down at Marjorie Stone Douglas High School, they're like my kid. My kid's 14 years old. From the day she went to kindergarten, she has learned to duck and cover. She has learned what to do in the case of a mass shooting. My daughter knows what to do in the case of a mass shooting. She has actually, at 14, been trained how to watch out for disabled kids who may not be able to take care of themselves, and how to get them into the closet where they might be safe. The fundamental stuff that children have to deal with. I'm sorry, we didn't take it in. We didn't understand it as well as we should have. Many of the people in this room grew up during the Cold War. They know about fearing a Russian nuclear attack. Except the Russian nuclear attack was never coming. It never came. These children have grown up with the same kind of fear, the same kind of training, and it does come. Every month, month after month, tens of thousands of people killed, children being killed in schools across this country. These kids grew up with that. Their entire life. You realize the kids down there in Parkland, Florida, they came to school. They came into the school system after the Columbine shootings, right? Their whole experience has been guns and violence and dead children. And for so long we said, you know, when that happens, we just have to mourn. We have to give them some hopes and prayers. Paul Ryan, he's great at that, hopes and prayers. These children, and remember, they still are children. These children grew up in this experience. And when it came to their school, they said, yeah, we'll probably mourn for the rest of our life for our friends and our teachers who've been killed. But we're not going to let that stop us from speaking our truth to power. We're going to use our pain, our tragedy, the horror of what we have been through, the barriers and the difficulties and the challenges to step into this breach and to speak a truth that needs to be spoken, and that is that a country that cannot keep its children safe in their schools must change its policies so that the violence stops. And I don't know where it's going to end. I don't know how far they're going to get. But I have to tell you, I've covered this issue for too long. Something fundamental is changing. And so, while I can tell you about all the vulnerabilities that Donald Trump reveals, this is what I will also tell you. We have children who are calling us to move beyond our fear, our uncertainty, beyond the challenges that are put before us. Children are telling us that it is not enough to feel overwhelmed. It's not sufficient. You don't have a right to say that it can't be done. You don't have a right to say we can't overcome money in politics. You don't have a right to say you can't overcome bad district lines and gerrymandering and all the challenges of politics. You don't have a right to say that you can't overcome the challenges of a media system that doesn't cover politics well. You have to step up and do more. You have to step up and believe harder and more passionately. The fact of the matter is, I saw a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid, with Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, the slickest, most ridiculous politician. Remember when he tried to do the response to President Obama's speech and he had to go over and get a glass of water? He's an embarrassing figure. And yet, he was given respect by this system. The whole thing kept saying, oh yeah, you're Marco Rubio, that's cool. You can say that empty, meaningless thing and we'll listen to you, we'll accept that. And then this kid, this child, because until you're 18, you're still a child. This child stood there with Marco Rubio, and when Marco Rubio lied to this child said, I will not accept that. I won't accept the lies anymore. I won't accept the double talk anymore. I won't accept the failures anymore. Not just your failures, but the failures of a system that allows issues that must be addressed to be addressed. And brothers and sisters, I conclude tonight by saying, if 17-year-old children can hold the powerful to account, then I believe that adults have a fundamental responsibility to rise up and to say, we are done with the past. We are done with the failed politics. We are done with the excuses that we make to ourselves. We are ready to stand as strong as we have ever stood and to wrench this system out of the past and set it into a future where there is economic and social justice, where our children have been cared for, where our society is functional, where our humanity is reflected in our governance. If the children can get it right, then the adults can get it right. It's been too long, brothers and sisters. Donald Trump is the President of the United States. Our schools are filled with violence. Our economic life is uncertain. We've got military bases all over the world. We just passed tax cuts for billionaires. We're dismantling the Environmental Protection Agency in the midst of a climate crisis. We're failing. Let's stop failing. Let's stand up and say, just like those kids have, yeah, I know everybody got beat in the past. We're done being beat. This time we're going to win. And what we're going to win for is a country that is worthy of our humanity. And we're not going to accept any excuses because it's way too late. Now it's time for us to rise up, to give meaning to what we have believed, and to believe the rest of this country is not so evil, not so lost, not so failed as the pundits tell us. To believe that when we speak truth to power, all sorts of people who maybe weren't with us in the past will join with us. Even in that conservative town that doesn't always elect progressives to public office, even in a congressional district sometimes doesn't send the best people to Congress, even in a state that has been so wrong on so many issues for so long, even in a country that has failed to address fundamental issues like healthcare in the way that it must be addressed, even in a world that has so much to be disappointed by, we can make it over again, brothers and sisters. We can make it right. We can begin right here tonight and say, no compromises, no down on our knees anymore. We rise up and demand the America that can be, the America that will make all of us proud, the America that will make us safe and secure and happy and hopeful. It can be that. It's just if you make that demand. Thank you. Thank you. Now I promised you two things. Number one, take some questions. A couple of them. Number two, going to get you out of here at a reasonable time. Not going to keep you here all night. So let's take a couple of questions. It'll make the whole evening smarter.
But in 2000, if the people had realized what George W. Bush could appoint to the Supreme Court that does not leave when the president leaves, Gore would have won hands down because he was going to be able to replace 2 to 4 Supreme Court justices that don't leave when the president leaves.
Yeah.
So that's something that they never talk about in these elections.
Well, and you know what? That's a really good question to ask. Do people always say, I don't know what Donald Trump stands for. I'm not really sure where he's coming from. I know where he stands for. I know where he's coming from. He stands for delivering for the Republican Party's base. He stands for giving them what they want on social issues and on economic issues. And the fact of the matter is he's been very, very consistent. He put Neil Gorsuch on the U.S. Supreme Court because Neil Gorsuch comes from a right-wing Republican family. His mother served in the Reagan administration. He was a head of lawyers for Bush. He is an absolutely defined social conservative, and he was put on that Supreme Court to undo a woman's right to choose and to undo all of the progress we have made on so many of these issues. We know that to be the case. We know that to be the case. And the fact of the matter is, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg's getting older every day. And that woman is absolutely absolutely committed to hold on strong and not to leave. But brothers and sisters, she needs a cavalry, right? She needs somebody to come there and say that we're not gonna lose sight of this thing next time. And I want that poor woman to be able to retire if she wants to. And so, brothers and sisters, yes, court issues matter. It matters to talk about who sits on the Supreme Court of the United States, and it matters to talk about who sits on the federal courts of the United States in states like Arizona. And so the truth is that, yeah, we got to make it a central issue. You're absolutely right. Who else got a question?
So, my friend here is asking the question, are we being manipulated, or are your neighbors a bunch of really awful people?
Enjoy the Arizona response. Don't, trust me, you can hear it all over the country. Look, here's the subtlety of American politics. There's a couple of things that you really need to remember. Number one, half of us don't vote. For president, roughly half of us don't vote. In an off-year election in a state like Arizona, could be as high as 60% of the people don't vote. We have a stunningly low level of participation in America. And this is a failure of the political class. There's a genuine failure to make elections matter, right? The Democratic Party should never, ever run an election campaign in which it doesn't have a major platform plank with which everyone is conversant that deals with the condition of the people in the lowest 40% of our economic life, right? Democrats are supposed to be the party of working folks and the poor. And so there should never be an election where the Democrats don't have something major that if they win, working people and the poor get. Because if they have that, you will be amazed by what an improvement in turnout you see. And so number one, this is to get to your question, number one, you actually have to offer people something real, not kind of a compromise here, a compromise there. Doesn't mean you have to run all the way to the left. I would do that. But the fact of the matter is, I understand you got to talk to the voters you're dealing with, but too often political parties, the Democratic Party in particular, doesn't talk to the people it has to get to the polls. The Democratic Party, do you realize that if a young person walks by, that young person is more likely to be a Democrat than a Republican? Right off the bat. The numbers are astronomical. It's 2-to-1 virtually. And so, how could the Democratic Party not run with big fundamental issues to attract young people to the polls, right? So the fact is, our problem is the Republican Party has too frequently defined the issues around which we frame our campaigns. And as a result, when Democrats respond solely to those Republican issues, when their answer is, and I'm just talking about guns, and that's an example of it. If all the Democrats say is, you know, yeah, we want to have sensible gun regulation, versus Republicans saying maybe they don't. That's still operating in their wheelhouse. You have to say that, it's true. But you can't be limited to that. You also have to come with something else on the other side. You don't just run against Donald Trump, you run for something as well. And so you open that space up to bring people in. This gentleman asks about manipulation, and the fact of the matter is, we are some of the most manipulated people in the history of the world. Of course we are. We have a declining media system, which, especially at the local level, fails to cover our school boards, our city councils, even our state legislature. I was with Pam Powers-Hanley last night, and we were talking about fundamental issues up at the Capitol. I would bet you that the state senator would agree with me that sometimes they're dealing with some of the most important issues in Arizona, maybe in the country, and there's barely anybody covering it. We have fundamental gaps, and then at the same time, we have an open door to flooding our politics with money, right? And so people get their information less and less from the news, more and more from the ads. Not just fake news, but actual just TV ads and campaigns. So we're deeply manipulated. And you know who can pay for the manipulation? Koch brothers. Yeah, Sheldon Adelson. Rich people pay for manipulation. And it is true that Arizona has a wonderful system where you can actually run, right? You can actually go as a non-big money candidate. But the fact is that increasingly we see that under attack in all sorts of places. So the manipulation is real. And we shouldn't underestimate it. But the way to counter that manipulation, is not to go fight in the narrow zone that they want you to fight in. It is to push out to whole different areas. I'll give you the quickest story. On the night that Al Gore won the presidency but didn't get to become president, I was riding home. It was late at night. I was going from one radio studio to a television studio. And it was going to be a late night. I knew it was going to be a long night in Florida. It turned out to be 36 long nights. But I knew it was going to be a long night, so I stopped at a Wendy's. I apologize. And I got myself I was going to give myself a Coca-Cola and keep myself awake. And I was talking to the woman at the window, and she was getting my Coca-Cola at like midnight. And I said, "Did you vote today?" And her face fell. You could see that she felt guilty. And I didn't want her to feel guilty. I was just talking to her. But the fact is, she said, "I really wanted to. But you know, my husband left me." And I thought, already I'm into a deeper conversation. She said, "No," but she said, "My husband left me. I got 3 kids. And I don't have any money. I'm really not in a good situation. So I worked them. I get my kids off to school, and then I work the morning shift at McDonald's. Then after school, I come home. I take care of my kids. We work on our homework. We do all the stuff we got to do. And then when they're to bed, my sister comes over, and she sleeps over, and I come here and work the window at Wendy's. I sleep about 4 or 5 hours a day. And I just wanted to vote, but I just didn't, I couldn't fit it in. And I thought to myself, that's not her fault. That's A, the fault of a political system that doesn't make it easy to vote. But B, that is also the fault of politicians that don't offer her so much, that don't make voting so necessary for her, that she forces that time into her day. And I could tell you, if the Democratic Party had been running that year on universal daycare for every mother in America run through our schools in the way it is in countries around the world, I would bet you she would have found a way to get to vote. And so, when I do a platform, I start with that woman at the window. How do I get her to the polls? Because I don't think she's going to come and vote the way the Koch brothers want her to vote. So, that's the answer to your question, brother.
How do we reach out in a state like Arizona? How do we reach out to young people to get them to the polls, to get them registered to vote, when that's the way they get their communications?
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't know if everybody heard it on the other side of the room, so the kids didn't. But the fact of the matter is that young people have not been the target of the political class. The political class, there's a reason why student loans aren't the hottest issue in America. Even now, even while Democrats start talking about it. But Social Security always is. The reason for that is that old people vote. That's a good point. You want to find the highest voting demographic in America? It's people over 100. I'm not kidding, it is. If you are over 100, you are an absolutely perfect citizen. In fact, in many cases, it's the most exciting thing of the year for you. And the fact of the matter is that that's power. You define the politics by it. So how do you get young people to vote? Other countries do, by the way. Young people vote in other countries, and they're all texting too. So it's not just the texting thing. Number one, it goes to what we were talking about with this gentleman. You've got to offer them something. You've got to have an agenda that says it matters for you to come, and you have to make them believe that when they come to vote, if you win, you're actually going to do things for them. And we've had too much failure in that regard. This is a big deal. Democrats come to power, they better do something for those young people. But then here's something else that I know this is a hard thing to imagine. You might want to nominate some young candidates. I'm not kidding. I'm Irish by background. I'm inclined toward Irish candidates, separating. We all are inclined toward that which we know. I think one of the great things is that women are inclined to vote for women. That's a good thing, right? A lot of us are inclined to vote for people that we see as somehow similar to us because maybe they'll do something for us when they're in power. I don't think it's just identity politics. I think it is, I don't know how to break this system, how to break into it. I'm going to vote for somebody like me. Well, getting young people into politics and getting them not in as envelope stuffers, but as candidates for public office has a fundamental impact. And somehow in that text, they're going to hear about it. So don't ever put a slate together. You can have, I want to have the wisdom of a 70-year-old. Absolutely. I want to have the wisdom of older folks. But on any slate you put together, you better have somebody under 30 for everybody you got over 70. Right? You need that mix of candidates. The new Prime Minister of New Zealand is a 37-year-old woman. And the reason she won that office is because when her party, there was an older guy who was the head of the party, and they got a poll that showed him running under 25%. They were dying politically. And so, of course, what happens is when you're in real trouble, then you let the woman take over. Right? And so they let the 37-year-old woman become the leader of the party, and you know what happened? Suddenly, young people, young women started flooding into the campaign offices. And her name is Jacinda Ardern. And her whole thing, she literally had like a Facebook and an Instagram thing that says, Ask Jacinda. And every day people would send her questions, and she would answer them. She was mastering all the social media, and she was inviting people to talk to her, inviting people to become part of it, and they loved it. She's 37 years old. She's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and the first thing she did was initiate full family and medical leave for every young woman and every young man when they have a kid. They get 24 weeks off from work to take care of that kid. First thing they did, and then she announced that she's pregnant. And she's taking her leave not because she necessarily needs it, she's got a lot of support, but because she wants everyone in that country to know that when a woman has a child, she ought to have a little bit of time off in order to get to know that child, to take care of that kid. And then her partner is taking his time off too, because you can't raise a child if you only say the woman's got to do it, the guy ought to take a little responsibility as well. So that's what happens when you put a 37-year-old woman on your ticket at the top of it. I hope I answered your question. All right, we're going to take a couple more here. I promise you we're not going all night. This will be.
When you said that the average person of voting age, the biggest group is those over 100, our slogan should be to get people out to vote. Vote, you'll live longer.
There you go. Nicely done. Very good intervention. Yeah, your question, Ronald.
About 3 weeks ago, some very significant, in my opinion, some very significant litigation was filed in federal courts in 4 states.
It's not covered at all, is it? No, we don't know a thing about it. So he brings up this great effort to go into the courts to challenge this broken system, as the media doesn't cover it. The media doesn't cover so many things. That one of the fundamental responsibilities that you have as grassroots political people is to set up your own communication systems, to figure out how to communicate information yourself. You do that quite well in this group, but that's a very big deal. You've got to get the word out that things are happening. And I will tell you something, it's not just that lawsuit that's a big deal. You know what else is a big deal? Right now, across this country, people are challenging gerrymandering. And they are going to the courts. And you know what the weird thing is? In this Supreme Court, with all of its flaws, my friend, they might just overturn gerrymandering. It is a fundamental possibility. And you understand what could happen if we open up our political system to actual competition, where we have real races, where in every state in this country your vote might matter? We might get out of that 25% or 30% turnout. This could be a fundamental shift in this country. So we ought to cover the courts, we ought to cover these battles. We also ought to, it gives people hope. So that's very important, and I'm sad that we don't do it. So here's the bottom line, and what a great place to close off here. Donald Trump is a lousy businessman. He's no good at it. He fails again and again and again and again. He's been bankrupt 4 times. And the thing is, you know how he chooses his people he puts in power? If they help him through his bankruptcy. Our ambassador to Israel is his bankruptcy lawyer. I'm not making that up. That woman, poor woman's choking here. Just like, that cannot be. It's true, my dear. I apologize. So sorry to say. But it's okay. Our Secretary of Commerce of the United States of America is the guy who helped him through his second bankruptcy when he crashed the casinos of Atlantic City. Wilbur Ross is the guy that got the money together to help him through a bankruptcy, and so Donald Trump thought he was qualified to be the Secretary of Commerce of the United States of America. In fact, the people he puts in power are the people who helped him out of financial trouble. Now, the reason I bring that up is, you know, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a funny thing happened in Russia. A lot of people got really rich. They were called oligarchs. Now, amazing thing about the Russian oligarchs is they didn't seem to think that Russian banks were the best place to put their money. And so they kept looking around the world for places to put their money. A whole bunch of them decided to put their money in Deutsche Bank in Germany. Fair enough. It seemed like a good... I've been to Germany. The banks are fabulous. Very strong buildings. And so then, Deutsche Bank, intriguingly enough, emerged as one of the major international financiers for Donald Trump. Isn't that funny? Now here's the really funny thing. One of the lead guys at Deutsche Bank left Deutsche Bank to help run the Bank of Cyprus, down on the little island of Cyprus. And his partner was Wilbur Ross. You'll remember Wilbur, he's the guy who's our Secretary of Commerce. Now, I'm not a cynical person. But it does strike me that when a guy who gets Donald Trump out of his bankruptcies is running a bank on some island in the Mediterranean with a guy who manages a lot of money for the Russian oligarchs, there might just be a chance that some of that money was ending up helping Donald Trump. I know, you're shocked. It's hard to believe. And there might even be a chance, I know it's hard to imagine, there might even be a chance that Robert Mueller has Donald Trump's tax returns. And that in all that, you're going to start to see some names and figures and data that would matter. Now, many people like to think that the Russian involvement, the potential Russian involvement in the American election was this nefarious thing where they were actually trying to hack into things. So what we know is that attempts were made. Literally attempts were made to hack into our election process. Generally, the view is that most of them were unsuccessful. We will continue to examine that. That is very, very important. The most important thing, though, is to recognize that an attempt was made. If an attempt was made, then we ought to respond to that even before we find out what Robert Mueller finds out, which I think is going to involve Donald Trump's financing, where his money came from, and who he knew, and who he was receptive to. But here's the critical thing. No matter what happened with all that foreign money, or didn't, or what else going on there, if people are trying to hack our election system, shouldn't we do what Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin and several dozen other members of Congress have proposed, and that is to make the American election system a public utility. And to say that if we protect power plants from hacking, because we don't want a power plant to be hacked by some foreign entity or some terrorist or some dangerous player. If we say that we don't want our power plants to be endangered, and so we have a system for protecting them and to making sure that they can't be hacked, and that our government sees it as a fundamental responsibility to protect our power system, shouldn't we also say that we have a fundamental responsibility to turn our election system into a public utility that is protected from hacking by foreign powers and domestic powers, so that every vote is safe, every vote is counted, and that there is no uncertainty about our election process. That's a bill in Congress right now. And that goes beyond all the other things we know, but the fact of the matter is I do believe that Robert Mueller, at some point after all this long investigation, is going to walk in a report that has an awful lot to do with banks and other parts of the world and people that Donald Trump got to know quite a long time ago. Now, I may be wrong, and I accept that I can be wrong, but the fact of the matter is, when you're dealing with Donald Trump, if you imagine the worst, you're halfway there. So brothers and sisters, let us agree we've had a lovely time together. Now, you are wonderful people. Before you applaud, come, let me hold you for 1 second and tell you this. I promise I'm about to let you go. I was just up in Iceland, little tiny country. Iceland just last fall elected a new prime minister. She's 42 years old, mother of 3. About this tall, she's about 5 feet tall. She's a social democrat. She's a feminist. She's an environmentalist. She is already implementing full gender equality. She flew to the Paris Accords conference in December, and she said, well, we're not going to just keep up with the Accords, we're going to be 5 years ahead of them. Because we think climate change can't wait. She's restoring the social welfare state, making sure that health care is funded and all the other programs, and extending it out in all sorts of other areas. And she is proposing the idea of turning one of their banks in the country into a social bank that gives people the loans they need, not to make a profit, but to make sure that the society itself functions. And she's a literary scholar who gives lectures on the Icelandic love story. And when I was in Iceland doing a profile of her, I said, you still get a chance to do those lectures at all? Because you're one of the great literary critics, you're an expert in the area of Nordic crime fiction, all those murder mysteries, stuff like that. She said, oh yeah, I'm doing one tonight. And I said, I'm going to come to that. It was a snowy, cold night in Reykjavik. The area we're in the basement, there are about 50 people, fewer than are here tonight. And they come out to hear their prime minister. But she didn't make some big show. She came in on her own without security, threw her coat over a chair, and proceeded to give a 2-hour detailed lecture about the evolution of the love story and the growing role of women, respect for women in the context, and the emergence of a feminist sensibility in the literary culture of her country. And I thought to myself, wow, I am a long way from America. And boy, is this a long way from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I asked her about that, and she said, you know what? I used to feel a long way from it here as well. But now, I'm the Prime Minister, and I'm doing it my way. Brothers and sisters, as we look forward to the next politics in this country, I'm feeling like I want to have a progressive, feminist, environmentalist who wants to do better than all of the standards of the world, to lead the world in the right direction. And I wouldn't mind it at all if she gave us a 2-hour lecture on the American love story and the emerging role of women. Brothers and sisters, don't ask for too little, ask for too much. Thank you so much.